All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're digging into something you probably have in your fridge right now, butter. And it seems simple, but it might be hiding some pretty uncomfortable truths. Because if you can't trust your butter, what can you trust? So let's start with a really basic question. The butter you've got at home, is it actually what you think it is? Because honestly, with all the recent recalls and lab tests and sneaky recipe changes, the answer is way more complicated than it should be. Check out this number. 64,000 pounds. That's not a typo. That's how much of a single butter blend product got recalled. And get this, it's because it hid a major allergen, milk, in a butter product. It sounds crazy, but it's just a tiny piece of a much, much bigger problem happening in the dairy aisle. Yeah, we're calling this section the butter betrayal for a reason. Because what we're seeing here is a real pattern. This isn't just about one bad batch from one company. Nope. We're talking about everything from bacterial contamination to products being watered down, and it's happening with brands we all know and have trusted for years. And here's the thing. Behind all that shiny, familiar packaging is a supply chain that's really built for one thing: profit, not your health. Big companies are basically counting on you to keep buying the brands you grew up with out of habit. And while you're doing that, they're quietly messing with the recipes, using legal loopholes to sneak in cheaper ingredients, and cutting corners on safety. It's all about the bottom line. Okay, so let's get specific. We're going to look at 4 big-name brands you should probably think twice about. Each one tells a different story about how we, as shoppers, can get misled, whether it's just a drop in quality or something that feels a lot more like straight-up deception. First on the list, Land O'Lakes. I mean, this brand is American butter for a lot of people, right? It's all about that classic, nostalgic feeling. But there's this huge wave of complaints online that suggests something's really changed with the product itself. And this quote from a consumer board just hits the nail on the head. People are saying it just doesn't feel like butter anymore. They're noticing it smells weird, it melts in a really strange way, it feels kind of watery, and it burns super fast in the pan. Those are all huge red flags that the recipe is just not the same. So what's going on here? Well, the big issue is that they're accused of quietly shifting to butter blends, sometimes, and using labeling loopholes like natural flavorings to hide cheaper oils. They're coasting on that classic image while the quality drops. And on top of all that, some of their products use milk from cows treated with RBGH, a growth hormone that's actually banned in places like Canada and the EU. That really puts a dent in that wholesome nostalgic image, doesn't it? All right, next up, Great Value. This is Walmart's brand, and its main selling point is the price, right? It's the budget-friendly option. But some independent lab tests are raising some pretty serious questions about what you're really getting for that low price. And that brings us to this term, economic deception. It sounds fancy, but it's simple. It's when a product is watered down or the quality is lowered, but the label and price don't reflect that. You're being misled about what you're actually buying. It's not just about how it tastes, it's about paying for real butter and getting something, well, less. So here's the deal with Great Value. Lab tests have found that the butterfat content can fall below the legal standard for what can even be called butter, which means you might be buying what is, legally speaking, a spread. You're paying for butter but getting a diluted product. And the fact that the ingredients can change depending on where you buy it, that's a huge red flag for quality control. Okay, moving on to challenge butter. This one points to a totally different problem, but it's just as scary. It's about how things can go wrong in the supply chain. A product can start out fine, but then get ruined during storage or transport before it even hits the shelf. Just look at this. A major supplier for brands like Challenge had butter tests for peroxide levels that were nearly double the federal limit. Now, that's a sciencey term, but what it means in plain English is oxidation. The fat is literally going rancid. So, not surprisingly, you see consumer complaints about waxy textures, weird smells, and butter going bad way too fast. But here's the really scary part. When fats start to oxidize, you can't always see it or smell it. So you could be eating this compromised butter that can cause inflammation and gut problems, and you'd have no idea, all because something went wrong with keeping it cold on its way to the store. And finally, let's talk about Kerrygold. This is a big one, because a lot of people buy this brand thinking they're avoiding all these problems. It's the premium choice, right? Well, it turns out that even here, there can be a big gap between the marketing you see and what's actually happening behind the scenes. This slide really lays it out. The promise is this beautiful image of cows roaming Irish pastures 100% grass-fed. The reality? The milk supply includes cows that spend time inside and eat grain feed. The promise is that rich golden color comes from the grass. The reality? They sometimes use additives like annatto to keep the color consistent all year. And maybe the biggest one? They changed the recipe for their unsalted butter, adding skim milk after churning, which is basically a cost-cutting shortcut that isn't how traditional butter is made.
Okay, but look, it's not all doom and gloom. After seeing all the ways things can go wrong, it's actually really helpful to see what doing it right looks like. There are brands out there that are totally transparent and committed to quality. Let's talk about them.
So what does a trustworthy butter look like? Well, it comes down to three things. First, real pasture-based sourcing that you can actually verify. Second, strict standards backed by third-party certifications like Certified Humane or USDA Organic. And third, radical transparency. No hidden junk, no misleading marketing. What's on the label is what's in the box. And a couple of brands really nail this. Yep, two brands that really stand out are Vital Farms and Organic Valley. Vital Farms is all about that radical transparency. You can literally trace your butter back to the specific farm it came from. And it's certified humane and pasture-raised. Then you have Organic Valley, which is a farmer-owned co-op. They're USDA organic, which means no synthetic hormones, no antibiotics, no GMO feed. These aren't just pretty words on a package, they're verifiable standards. So the big question is, what do you do with all this? How does this change your next trip to the grocery store? Well, what can you do? It's easy to feel like you don't have a say, but honestly, the power to fix this whole mess is with us, the shoppers. Every dollar we spend sends a message that's way louder than any Super Bowl commercial. So here's your checklist. First, actually read the ingredients list. Don't just look at the pretty picture on the front. Look for real certifications like USDA Organic. Be super skeptical of vague terms like natural flavorings. Remember that a high price tag doesn't automatically mean high quality. And most importantly, vote with your wallet. Support the brands that are actually being honest. And I want to leave you with this thought, because really, if you can't even trust something as simple as butter, what does that say about everything else in the grocery store? This whole thing isn't just about butter. It's about learning to be a smarter shopper, to question what you're told, and to demand better from the companies that feed us.